Welcome to Sitcom Showdown, a podcast that reviews classic sitcom episodes and inducts them into our very own Hall of Fame. As usual, one of us has chosen a sitcom episode and the other guy has no idea what it's going to be. Will they already know it? Will they love it? Can they be convinced that it's worthy? Let's find out on Sitcom Showdown.
Welcome back to Sitcom Showdown. I'm Steve and I've got Jeff here with me, and I feel very privileged because it's actually his birthday.
Oh.
And what better way to spend your birthday than podcasting with me about sitcoms?
Oh, that's right. I'd totally forgotten.
Oh, come on.
Yes.
Does this mean I have to be nice to you tonight?
Oh, yeah. I better. If I'm ever going to use that favour, I better use it.
Yeah.
Doesn't come around very often.
Call that favour in.
Yeah, all right, I will.
So what have you got for us, Jeff?
Okay, I have got the British Empire. So should I do a quick breakdown of what the British Empire is all about?
Definitely.
All right. So before I launch into what it is, we'll just say it was on BBC One in the UK. It's a series that ran for 7 series.
Was it produced by the BBC or by someone else?
Good question. I'm just going to assume it was produced by the BBC.
I don't remember seeing the BBC logo
On it?
on it.
Yeah, possibly not.
We'll check it out
But it
in a
was
second.
on, yeah, exactly. It was on BBC One.
Okay.
Starting in 1991. Yes, this has been mentioned in previous Sitcom Showdown episodes as being a disaster-com, or a potential disaster-com.
Every episode's a disaster.
It is.
His marriage is a disaster. Everything's a disaster.
Yeah, it just depends on the scale, doesn't it?
Yes, it's only the depth that varies.
Very well put. So I shall now read directly, because I like to write out the summaries myself, and I've done it every time up until now. I'm just going to read it from Wikipedia. And then I'm going to argue with what Wikipedia says.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Gordon Brittis is the well-meaning but incompetent manager of Whitbury Newtown Leisure Centre.
I'm with him so far.
Yeah, completely tactless, totally annoying and forever coming up with half-baked ideas, and oblivious to all his aforementioned faults. Brittis is frequently upsetting his staff, the public, and his frazzled wife Helen, and he often brings confusion and chaos into their lives. I'd argue that's all he does. His wife Helen finds it increasingly difficult to cope with Gordon and turns to pills and affairs with other men to maintain her sanity. She's helped by supportive friend Laura, who again I think is just her only friend, because in her own non-work social circles, Mrs. Brittis would find it impossible to maintain friends being married to Mr. Brittis. And so it's only people that he works with that she can sort of be friends with.
Yep.
Because they haven't got much of a choice. Anyhow, Laura, who's the second in charge as well, she's really sort of calm and efficient. And she's at times got a grudging admiration for Mr. Brittis, because he's always trying to do things and he aims very high.
Yes.
And she sees him as an honest and decent guy, unlike her former husband, but that's neither here nor there. So Mr. Brittis's other deputy, Colin...
Yes.
What a character.
Not so high on the competency scale.
No way. And he's because they work in, health and making people fit and healthy and the best version of themselves. He takes a, shall we say, new age route to it via all his, natural potions and natural therapies and all these things. Poultices and so on, which doesn't do anything for any of his numerous health problems. And he's always got an infected hand covered in manky bandages. And his skin is terrible and all these sorts of things. Now, Colin handles other things around the centre, not so much the programs that people do, but more maintenance and who knows what else. Whatever the plot decides.
Yeah, whatever.
Anyway.
Whatever the disaster requires, really.
Yeah, exactly. Carol, who's at the front desk and greets all the public, she's completely overstressed all the time, having to deal with the public and the public having to deal with Mr. Brittis, so she would probably cop it a lot. But then she always seems to get pregnant and then not want to tell Mr. Brittis because he's a very morally upstanding dude who'd judge her for all that. And then so she hides her baby in the drawer at work.
That's a great ongoing joke.
Oh, wow. And then even when he knows that she's got young Ben in the drawer and she moves him into the cupboard to give him more space, and then she gets pregnant again. And anyway, So she's always in tears and doing all these sorts of things. And so other members of the team, you've got Julie, who's Mr. Brittus's personal assistant, and she's sort of really sarcastic and tells it how it is and all that sort of thing. Then you've got the people who work as the fitness instructors. You've got Linda as a fitness instructor, and she's really bubbly and can-do. And then you've got Tim and Gavin, who are a gay couple, but of course they don't want to tell Mr. Brittus because he'd be a judgmental dude.
Yep.
And they're always sort of making comments to reveal that they are, but then still trying to hide it. So it's a tricky thing with what they're doing.
But he never
twigs.
cottons on to what's going on.
They try to drop hints, and he just blithely doesn't pick up on them at all and makes ridiculous sexist comments and all that sort of stuff. Anyhow, so they're all the staff. And they're all trying to deal with him. So it's a big cast. So
what's
9 regular characters.
Oh, okay.
The writers have got to find lines for and have them doing things. And quite often there'll be 3 of them in Mr. Brittus's office, and they'll each get a line, but they're pretty much just standing around.
Yeah.
Doing bugger all.
What about Helen? Is she in every episode, or
she's in most of them? Yeah.
She just pops in for
because
a cup of tea or
to unload
something like that
to Laura, and things like that. Twice in this Wikipedia thing they mentioned that Mr. Brittus is incompetent.
He's almost overcompetent.
I'm glad you said that.
He's highly trained.
Oh yeah,
and he loves the job.
He's ultra professional.
Yeah,
very organised, very tidy.
So where does he go wrong?
Wow. Okay, so I'll read you my screed.
Right.
So this Wikipedia entry does lay it out in a pretty tidy manner, but, his competence is there. It's just his personality gets in the way. So he knows every rule and regulation. He's a master of scheduling and equipment. He knows how everything runs. He goes to all the conferences. He reads the industry literature. And he's got all these schemes for efficiency and safety and smooth running that they're just over the top, that's all. And they're utterly without flexibility. They can't accommodate any sort of human factors, and he's this super idealist and absolute stickler for the rules. And so this sort of sets up his plans are so tightly formatted that if one tiny thing, which is unexpected or unlucky or involves a simple human mistake or animal mistake or anything else, weather mistake, goes wrong, it topples all the dominoes because everything relies on everything else being perfect.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then when this inevitably happens, he doesn't approach it with flexibility. He then tries to control things even more, and he's got even more idealistic and rigid solutions, and that just multiplies the effects. So I'd agree with you. He's uber competent.
Is he a micromanager?
He leaves people to get on with things. It's just that he doesn't listen, and he doesn't take suggestions on board.
Okay.
That's my take on it. Anyway, we've got this big cast, so shall I quickly run over the cast?
Yes.
I've just run over them, but I mean in terms of actors.
Yes, notables?
Well, the biggest notable is Chris Barry, of course, from Red Dwarf as Rimmer. And so the rest of the cast, and we discussed this last time, if you've got a sitcom with a big cast, it doesn't pay to concentrate on them too much because we've got time restrictions.
Yep.
So I'll just say that most of the cast are really good actors. And having looked at their IMDb's, the highlights, which we'll run through, are people who have worked very steadily in television and stage since then, but they haven't been the stars of their own shows.
Yep.
And only a couple of them have had a leading role. So Laura, for example, somebody St. John. Where's my notes? Julia St. John. So then she went on to be in a drama where it was a husband and wife team, and she was the wife in that, so she was a lead in that for 2 years.
Right.
But as far as the other actors, the minor cast didn't work much after this. The receptionist Carol, Harriet Thorpe, she's great in British Empire, and she was in Absolutely Fabulous for a hell of a long time.
Oh, which character should she play in that?
I haven't watched a lot of Fab, so I don't know. It didn't ring any bells when I read the thing, so apologies to fans of Absolutely Fabulous. But they'll know. And Mrs. Brittus, of course, Pippa Haywood, because she looks so familiar when you see her. You think she's starred in something else, but not really. But she has never been out of work. Oh, I'm glad you're looking stuff up.
TV work?
Oh yeah, TV work. So she's been in cop shows as a DCI. She's been in heaps of TV where she'll be a regular cast member, but just not up the bill.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so they've done well for themselves, but none of them have gone on to be stars in their own right or anything like that. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on the cast because it'll suck up a lot of our available half hour.
Right, I'm just going to have a...
Well, while you're doing that, Steve, I'm going to set up the DVD player. Let's go off and watch it.
All right, let's do it.
Cool.
There's not a lot of point testing in here, I'm afraid.
I beg to disagree, Graham. Believe it or not, this is one of our worst areas. Only last week we had the entire Swedish netball team plus reserves on this floor in tears. I saw it with my own eyes.
It's true. Mr. Brittas was umpire. I meant there's no point testing a room this size. Sick building syndrome's associated with confined spaces, artificial lighting.
Well, I still think it's worth checking.
But you can't. All right, I'll do it. Sure these people won't complain?
Ah, now there you touch on a sore point, Graham. Sadly, these good ladies couldn't complain even if they wanted to. That's why they're here.
What?
They're doing an awareness and assertiveness course.
You see, Graham, the ladies in this room lack self-confidence. Perfectly understandable as far as I'm concerned. They're all rather unattractive, overweight. In fact, they're not very bright. So what we do is we bring them in here to persuade them that despite all that, they still have a real individual worth and value. Isn't that right, Marjorie?
My name's Rosemary.
Of course it is. Good old Rosie, eh? Well done, that girl.
All right, we're back. We've just watched British Empire, and the one we watched is episode 4 of series 2. And it doesn't have a title because these guys don't do titles for their episode. What? Which saves a lot of mucking about. I think this is one of those situations, just thinking about our discussion before the break, where you know the sitcom and I know the sitcom. And so as we chat about it, we haven't pointed out obvious things because we each know each other knows it. Does that make any sense?
Makes sense to
So
me.
I just want to reiterate that basically Mr. Brittas runs this big, beautiful leisure centre where they have, swimming and squash courts and gym and all these things. And they're running all these sports programs for the community and lots of other, self-improvement programs for people as well. And you'd think it would be absolutely chock-a-block, but because Mr. Brittas runs it with so many rules and, just to join, it probably takes 3 weeks of multiple ID checks. And
Doesn't he go on holiday during one episode and everyone's flocked to the centre and the numbers are up, and then he comes back and everyone's moaning about it?
Yeah, that's the first episode of series 2.
Ah.
And again, before the synopsis, I looked at it and was surprised to find that series 6 and 7, because Mr. Brittas had been killed off at the end of series 5, and they ignored that and went against some previous canon,
Yes.
to bring him back for series 6 and 7. Now the writers, Richard Fagan and Andrew Norris, who also wrote Chance in a Million, they weren't happy about it, and the actress playing Laura, Julia St. John, wasn't happy about this, and they weren't involved in series 6 and 7.
Right.
But it just goes to show that it was such a popular sitcom that despite all of that, they would bring it back and
Well, that's
continue. Yeah.
Surprising.
And they had about 5 or 6 writers for the last 2 series. So one of the reasons I chose this episode,
Well, I've got to ask you why you chose this particular episode.
is because it's very simple.
I shouldn't have yawned then.
No,
Let's do that again.
it's fine.
Anyway, you're telling me that the reason you chose this episode...
I'll just snooze, Jeffrey, while you explain what's going on. So it's very simple compared to other episodes. Other episodes might have more disastrous stuff happening, including the one where tons of people die and Mr. Brittas ends up in court and it's all that. But I didn't choose that one because that is a courtroom episode with flashbacks to things that happen, and I don't think it really sums up what the British Empire is all about. So it's not the most disastrous of disasters. And often to get these things happening, it has to be a very complex plot. So I've chosen the simplest plot I could find, and one that illustrates what Mr. Brittas is as simply and effectively as possible.
I'd say it's a character-heavy plot.
It totally is. So with that said, let's launch into it.
Okay.
So Mr. Brittis is sitting at his desk at the beginning of the episode in a tuxedo, which is unusual and attention-getting from the get-go.
Yep.
And Laura comes in, and there's some blather about a foot inspection, in which obviously Mr. Brittis is trying to figure out what's happening with Colin's feet, but he can't just ask Colin. So to make it look like he's not picking on Colin, he asks to inspect everybody's feet. But that goes nowhere, and it's over with in a second. But it did remind me of Dad's Army when they did a foot inspection.
That's why you're doing that. I think the theme song is quite interesting. It's this military type of theme.
Good
Made me
point.
think of, well, not Dad's Army, but something like that. I don't know whether it's because he likes to run it as a
Oh, I reckon you're
very
totally right.
regimented organisation or something like that.
Seems totally logical.
Right, carry on. Foot inspections.
Yeah, carry
As you
on,
were.
Walker. Yeah, no worries. So, in a nutshell, he calls a meeting with Laura and Colin to say, right, I've discovered the cause of all the problems. Oh, well, Mr. Brittis, what sort of problems? Oh, the disturbances, and they say, you mean fights and arguments. So all these things keep happening in the centre, and people get really aggro.
amazing.
It is amazing. So he thinks it's sick building syndrome, which he's just heard about, and that the building's sort of leaching off either noise pollution or gases, or just the way it's laid out with feng shui, even though he doesn't mention feng shui or however you pronounce it. Just it's something to do with the building.
This is a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you. That wasn't a rhetorical question. That was a definitive statement. Yes, and you'd know. That's true. We won't reveal which profession either of us are in, but we know.
Yes, we're...
We'll say no more. But anyway, he hires an expert who Mr. Brittis has already decided this guy is going to come in and solve all our problems and tell us what to do, and it'll fix up all these things.
Graham Hansen, the sick building inspector.
The sick building dude. Meanwhile, Mr. Brittis has been doing some acrobatic leaning to reach for documents and stuff, which piques our interest.
Yes.
So if anyone remembers Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal video clip, where he can lean all the way forward and all the way back.
Yep.
And we soon discover that Mr. Brittis is still in his tuxedo and he's leaning at odd angles because his ankles
Yes, and his ankles are a bit odd.
and his feet are encased in concrete, because apparently there was a Rotarians dinner the night before in which, rather than letting them get on with their event, he burst in with some sort of complaint about how they'd been using the toilets, and then gives them a list of perpetrators and a mop, and then tells everyone to get... He'd annoyed these Rotarians anyway, and so they'd somehow, because some of them are doctors and some of them are builders, they'd knocked him out with an injection, encased his feet in
it's pretty
concrete,
funny.
and dumped him in his office. And so hence he wasn't able to go home that night. And Helen, his wife, had arrived at the leisure centre wondering if he's okay and if he's there because he didn't come home last night.
Yeah.
And then she's talking to Laura and it all comes out that this is what happened to him. And Laura's saying, Helen, why does he annoy people? Does he not realise he's doing it? Doesn't he pick up on the signs that people are unhappy? And she explains, well, no, of course he doesn't know.
Yes.
He's oblivious to the whole thing.
And Helen says that she's tried to talk to him about this before.
But he doesn't listen.
And it's just going in one ear and out the other.
And why doesn't he listen? And why can't you have a proper conversation with him, Steve?
Yes.
Because he's always moving about from place to place. And Laura's going, I don't think that's a problem right now.
Yes.
But Mr. Brittis gets around this because meanwhile...
Yes. Let's stick a pin in that.
Let's stick a pin in that. Meanwhile, the expert has arrived, Graham, and Mr. Brittis starts, he says, sit down, have a coffee, and then meanwhile does all these things to wind him up by not listening to him. And then as soon as Graham's got his coffee, he goes, right, let's go. We're on a tour of the building, which means Mr. Brittis has got to be wheeled around on a trolley by Colin with the concrete block on the bottom of the trolley and him being wheeled around. And he's just taking Graham from room to room and, anyhow. Sorry, I've got to turn my page here.
And every room basically involves Mr. Brittis winding some patron up to the point where they get completely frustrated and lose the plot with him.
And then he goes, see, that's evidence that the
Yes.
building is sick.
See this, Graham?
And what are you going to do about
That's
it,
exactly
Graham?
what I'm talking
Run
about.
some tests. But anyway, this tour he takes Graham on ends up... He ruins Graham's suit, breaks his vintage fountain pen, smashes his ultra-valuable and uniquely programmed computer
That
that
made me
took him
laugh.
6 months to...
It took me 6 months to program that. These days it would take you 3 minutes to download the app.
Ah,
If
true.
that.
Yes, it was a strange-looking laptop. And eventually, after all this going from room to room with disaster after disaster, Graham gets wheeled out on a stretcher after being squashed by a patron of the health club who fell from a great height onto him. Oh, and that's where all the entertainment is, because it takes quite a while for this tour to happen, and you see Graham's frustration building and building until eventually he just loses it with Mr. Brittus and then
Yeah, completely snaps.
goes to walk out, but then events happen and he gets stretchered out. So Mr. Brittus, of course, again sees this as evidence the building's unsafe, and he evacuates the leisure centre, which he seems to do quite often because Laura's getting very annoyed and like, what's happening now?
Yeah, she did seem to snap.
Which is unlike her, because she's normally very keep it together.
Yep.
All the staff are out because everyone's been evacuated. All the customers are out. Mr. Brittus looks around and realises he's standing there on a trolley with his feet in concrete and he can't
By
go
himself.
anywhere. So Laura leaps on this opportunity to then finally have it out with him, which she does, and she says, "You don't listen to people." And we could go through the whole conversation, but we won't.
She at least takes him upstairs to the privacy of his office.
So she's explaining to Mr. Brittus, finally, after a series and a half, that he doesn't listen to people. He's completely inflexible. And he's obviously not believing a word she's saying and saying people just don't say what they mean then, and it's all their fault. So she says, let's do an experiment, pal. Because Mr. Brittus had bought his wife a moped in the previous episode because she wanted some transport. So he got her a little blue moped, some Dayglow green wet weather clothes to wear on it, and a bright yellow helmet that says, "Hi, I'm Helen" on it so she can meet people in traffic. And she was so upset about it, but she was going to leave him. But anyway, that's a different episode. So she says, ask your wife if she's happy with the moped. If she says yes, it's fine, she means no, not really. And ask her if she preferred a car. And if she says no, not really, it's fine, she means yes, she would prefer a car. And so anyway, needless to say, the episode ends with him asking Helen these questions while they're waiting for the stonemason to come and chip him out of the concrete. And Laura was right. And Mrs. Brittus answered the question, yeah.
She gives him a big snog.
Because-
In fact, 2 big snogs.
Yeah, but why does she give him 2 big snogs? Because he offers to finally buy her a car, because Laura was right. He's had his eyes opened.
He's listened to her.
He's listened, and it's paid dividends.
Yep.
And so he thought, I'm going to try these new people skills I've got out on the stonemason. Which, needless.
Probably not a good idea when your feet are encased in concrete.
And the episode ends before you see Mr. Brittus eventually probably getting his lights punched out or something like that by the stonemason.
Right, she's all put through his skull or something.
Yeah. But as I say, this episode is quite small by comparison to most, and it's contained, but it does focus on what Mr. Brittus does with honestly the best of intentions to drive people bananas, and why the centre's a failure, even though he's a competent man. And Steve, I'll hand it over to you while I switch my page back.
Do you want some comments?
Yeah, what have you got?
Well, you've completely missed the subplot of Helen's son.
Carol's son Ben,
Ben,
with the mousey.
Yeah, the son who lives in the drawer. Well, she's taken Helen's comments on board and shifted him to the wide open spaces of the cupboard
Instead of the drawer.
And so that's going really well. And there's a mouse loose in the leisure centre.
It's a moose loose?
Yeah, the moose has moved into Ben's cupboard, and they're having a great old time.
They've befriended each other.
Yeah, they befriended each other. And I mean, it was funny. It didn't really go. I was expecting this to turn into
A major
you know
plot
how often several
Strands.
of these kind of things just converge into a complete hurricane of nastiness. But it didn't. That didn't happen. But
No.
it made me laugh quite a lot.
But it does give you some great Carol moments, because I just love whenever Carol's on screen, because her facial expressions and the way she does things, and it's just a great character, I feel.
Yes. Before we move on from Ben, I just wanted to mention great off-screen characters, sitcom characters that make you laugh, but then you don't actually ever see them. Like Wolowitz's mum in The Big Bang Theory.
This is a brilliant tangent. I hope we've got time. So we got Wolowitz's mum.
That's as far as I got.
Mrs. Manring
Right.
is another one. You never see Mrs. Manring in Dad's Army, Captain Manring's wife. We've got Ben, the youngster, there. I can't think of any more, but I reckon with
Come on, listeners.
research we could get up to 10.
Well,
It's a big ask, but I reckon it's doable. So yes, dear listener, please, if you know any unseen characters that are often referred to.
Yeah, or even you can hear them
Like
off screen or
Wallowitz's
something
mum?
like that. Yeah.
Good point.
Well, 7 to go.
7 to go.
So back to you.
Oh, no, well, Peggy's mum in Married with Children, who you never see, but you hear her voice, and she even moves in with them
What?
for a period. Unseen sitcom characters. Ooh. What else did you have?
Accident praying Colin, Colin's handkerchief. Basically, just lots of gags about Colin doing gross stuff. Oh, I did want to comment on the location work. You do get a bit of that scattered throughout as they're doing their rounds of the leisure centre. And I quite like that about the British Empire.
Oh, there's
They
lots
do
of...
go outside fairly often. I don't know where they filmed it, but it's good.
So,
Where did we get to?
well, we got to the end of the thing and we discussed the Ben subplot, but I think, yeah, it shows exactly how Gordon Brittis is, and he's tactlessly helpful. He wants to help everyone, and he genuinely does, but what he does is bring up all their flaws in his quest to help people improve themselves. He says, well, this is wrong with you, and that's wrong with you, and you're fat, and you've got too much hair on your top lip, and, you know, you could do something about this. And then if he gets their back up, instead of being sympathetic, he basically helpfully, in inverted commas, lectures people. If Carol's having a bad time, he won't say, you know, that's awful and we've got to help you. He'll say, we've got to help you stop making all these crap decisions you've made, and if you didn't do this and if you didn't do that, you wouldn't find yourself in these.
Yeah, and the worst thing is that if someone sits him down to point out his flaws, he just can't get his head around it.
No.
Well, he doesn't hear it, can't get his head around it.
And he wouldn't believe it if you did,
yeah,
he did
it's
understand.
infuriating.
But he loves people.
Yeah.
You know, he loves his staff and he loves his wife and he does all this stuff, but he just,
He's a bit like Michael Scott from The Office.
I think you're
Underneath
right.
it all, a nice person, but just goes about it the wrong way.
I think this serves as good an example of the British Empire as any other,
I agree.
depending on how you see the British Empire.
Yeah, well, I can imagine it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's my cup of tea.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
All right, so shall we take this example of the British Empire and whack it into the Sitcom Showdown Hall of Fame?
Yes, I think so.
All right. Cool.
Thanks for bringing that along, Jeff. Really enjoyed it, and I'm glad it made its way into the Hall of Fame. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time and sharing another sitcom with you soon.
Oh, good.
Yeah, see you later, everyone.
Right, cheers. Bye. Join us next time on Sitcom Showdown when we'll be putting another 5-star episode under the microscope. And in the meantime, you can contact us with feedback on Facebook, Twitter @Sitcom Showdown, or by email sitcomshowdown@gmail.com.